Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janvalabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janvalabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tiravanachari. Jamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janvalabha Girivardhari. Valabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janvalabha Girivardhari. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Nandana Braja Janaran. Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tiravanachari. Jamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari, Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribhajakacharya Astotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Lord Jagannath, Lord Baladev, Lady Subhadra Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Giridhari Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Giriraj Ki Jai Giriraj Govardhan Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Well, I remember Bhajan Maharaj used to often chant a nice verse. Krishna Swadamo Bhagate Dharmagyanadi Bisaha Kalona Stadrishamesha Puranar Kodunodita. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by knowledge, religion, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So, hang on 1 second here. Don't get old. You need all these different glasses and hearing aids and you name it. So 1 second, please. We are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9. This canto is Liberation, is that right, Trivita Prabhu? Yeah, Liberation. Chapter 19, King Yayāti achieves liberation. So we get into the culmination of the canto. And today we are on verses 7, which has no purport, and 8. Who do we have on the board? 10. Oh, did I make a mistake? Okay, so we're going to do through 10? No, that's fine. Okay. Yesterday, Dharma did 4, 5, and 6, yeah? Okay. So we'll start with 7 through 10. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I should have checked. I studied for 7 through 8, but more purport the better. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so just read the English to the verses up to the one we have on the board, and we have 10 on the board. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the guidance there. Okay, so text 7. This is good. We're kind of continuing with the, what is it? The Basta Karma, the business of the goat. Okay. When the she-goat who had fallen into the well saw her beloved goat engaged in sexual affairs with another she-goat, she could not tolerate the goat's activities. Aggrieved by her husband's behavior with another, the she-goat thought that the he-goat was not actually her friend, but was hard-hearted and was her friend only for the time being. Therefore, because her husband was lusty, she left him and returned to her former maintainer. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The word Swaminam is significant. Swami means caretaker or master. Devayani was cared for by Śukrācārya before her marriage, and after her marriage she was cared for by Yayāti. But here the word Swaminam indicates that Devayani left the protection of her husband Yayāti and returned to her former protector Śukrācārya. Vedic civilization recommends that a woman stay under the protection of a man. During childhood, she should be cared for by her father, in youth by her husband, and in old age by a grown son. In any stage of life, a woman should not have independence. Text 9. Being very sorry, the he-goat, who was subservient to his wife, followed the she-goat on the road and tried his best to flatter her, but he could not pacify her. And today's verse on the board, Tasya. One sec here, make sure I do it right. Tatra Dvija Kaschit Ajaswami Achinat Rusha Lambantam Vrishanam Bhuya Sandade Artaya Yogavit. Okay, so one sec here. Tasya Tatra Dvija Kaschid Aja Swamya Chinadrusha Lambantam Vrishanam Bhuya Sandader Tayak Yogavit. Okay, sorry, this is on 2 pages. So. Tasya Tatra Dvija Kaschid Aja Swamya Chinadrusha Lambantam Rishanam Bhuya Sandader Tayak Yogavit. Tasya Tatra Dvija Kaschid Aja Swamya Chinadrusha Lambantam Rishanam Bhuya Sandader Taya Yogavit. Tasya Tatra Dvija Kaschid Aja Swamya Chinadrusha Lambantam Rishanam Bhuya Sandader Taya Yogavit. Kasit Kata Dvija Kaschid Aja Samya Chinadrusha Kambantam Rishanam Bhuya Sandader Taya Yogavit. Tasya Tatra Dvija Kaschid Aja Swamya Chinadrusha Lambantam Rishanam Bhuya Sandader Taya Yogavit. Tasya Tatra Dvija Kaschid Aja Swamya Chinadrusha Lambantam Rishanam Bhuya Sandadirtaya Yogavid. Internet world, any chanters out there in cyberspace?
Tasya tatra dija kaschid.
Tasya tatra dija kaschid.
Aja samva achinadrusha.
Aja swamya chinadrusha.
Lambantam drishanam bhuya.
Lambantam drishanam bhuya.
Shandadhe ritaya yogavid.
Okay, so we will do the word meanings. Tasya, of the he-goat. Tatra, thereupon. Dvija, Brahmana. Kaschit, some. Aja Swami, the maintainer of another she-goat. Achinat, castrated, made effeminate. Rusha, out of anger. Lambantam, long. Vrishanam, testicles. Bhuya, again. Sandade, joined. Artaya, for self-interest. Yogavit, expert in the power of mystic yoga. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The she-goat went to the residence of a Brahmin, who is the maintainer of another she-goat. And that Brahmin angrily cut off the he-goat's dangling testicles. But at the he-goat's request, the Brahmin later rejoined them by the power of mystic yoga. Please repeat. The she-goat went to the residence of a Brahmin, who is the maintainer of another she-goat. And that Brahmin angrily cut off the he-goat's dangling testicles. But at the he-goat's request, the Brahmana later rejoined them by the power of mystic yoga. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here Śukrācārya is figuratively described as the husband of another she-goat. This indicates that the relationship between husband and wife in any society, whether higher or lower than human society, is nothing but the same relationship between he-goat and she-goat. For the material relationship between man and woman is one of sex. Yan mai tonadi grihamedi sukham hitucham. Śukrācārya was an acharya, or expert, in family affairs, which involve the transfer of semen from he-goat to she-goat. The words Kaschid Ajaswami expressly indicate herein that Śukrācārya was no better than Yayāti, for both of them were interested in family affairs generated by Shukra, or semen. Śukrācārya first cursed Yayāti to become old so that he could no longer indulge in sex. But when Śukrācārya saw that Yayāti's emasculation would make his own daughter a victim of punishment, he used his mystic power to restore Yayāti's masculinity. Because he used his power of mystic yoga for family affairs and not to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this exercise in the magic of yoga was no better than the affairs of he-goats and she-goats. Yogic power should properly be used to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the Lord recommends in Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, 47th verse. Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten taratmana shraddhavan bhajate omam same yuktatamo mata. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Om Ajnana Tamarandasya Jananjanan Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitanjana tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I have to adjust this slightly because of my line of sight. Give me a second. I don't want to break it. ISKCON, we break a lot of microphone stands because we're very hesitant to turn these little dials, but it's worth the extra second, I find, because there's an awful lot of broken microphone stands in ISKCON. Let's see. Okay, thank you. Just trying to get the right line of sight here for my glasses and my eyes. So we did a few verses by Krishna's grace, and at least the first couple of verses say a little something about that first, and then we'll move on to today's verse a little more, just because I put a little time into thinking about the first two. So this is his allegory is continuing this basta karma, the business of the goats. We learned the business of the goats primarily is sex, right? And actually, it's kind of fitting that he's actually using this example to describe his own activities, because as we've been reading about his activities, it's also very much focused on sex, right? He had a very strong desire to enjoy in that way. And, so much so that he even, when time was running out, he asked his sons even to give his youth so he could continue in this endeavor, right? So, we understand this personality, Maharaj Yayāti, who actually later in this chapter is going to attain personal liberation. It's actually described towards the end of the chapter that he goes back to Godhead, that served the Lord in a personal form. So, on the one hand, we have to learn lessons, and on the other hand, we have to be respectful of these amazing personalities. The ninth canto is very interesting because, obviously Lord Ramachandra's pastimes are there. There's a lot of amazing pastimes. But you also see a lot of really far out stuff, being done by really elevated demigods and Brihaspati and his brother and people, really high people running around with each other's wives. And, you have a lot of really far out stuff going on, And again, this is in previous yugas. These are people that are pretty strictly following Varnashram, right? But you see, like Prabhupada says in the purport in the Bhagavad Gita, the problem with just following rules and regulations without really understanding the ultimate, essence behind them is that we can get caught up in that and we can lose our way. And Prabhupada says that even on the royal road, there's always a chance of an accident, right? So these are very elevated personalities. They're not, Yayāti spent all this time in enjoyment, but then when the time came, he buckled down. He put his mind to it, right? He got the realization, he acted on it, and by the end of the chapter, he goes back to Godhead, right? So these are amazing personalities. And so anyway, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we can see how even in very elevated societies, right, the goats are basta karma. Their main business is sex. And everybody else, the same thing, right? It makes the world go around, right? The basic economic principle is this desire to family enjoyment, right? Why does a man go to work? Why does a guy get out of bed? Why does a guy do anything practically, right? Because he wants to have some happiness from his family life, right? So everything is going on under this basic principle. So, this is reality. And as Dharmasetu Prabhu touched on yesterday, Krishna doesn't need this material world. He's got absolutely no purpose for it personally, right? Lakshmi Sahasrata Samra. Krishna is being served not by one, but by hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune. Every pure devotee in the spiritual world, of whom there is no limit practically, are all fully serving Lord Krishna with heart and soul and body and words and mind, and with all of the unique qualities and all the unique nuances of their personalities. They're just offering their hearts. One time we were in Mayapur, and there was a class, and I forget the scripture, but it was one of the scriptures that gives a very intimate look at life in the spiritual world. And Dharmasetu Prabhu was visiting, actually, and we went to this class together. And I remember at the end of the class, he asked the Swami giving the class, like, wow, this is so nuanced, you know what I mean? Because when you're reading about the interrelationships between people in the spiritual world, it's not dull for a second. I mean, it's like everybody is just overflowing with transcendental emotion, and they're exchanging their reciprocal loving dealings with the Lord, but also with each other on very, very high level. We have this understanding. You sometimes hear that in average life, the average person uses, 10 or 15% of their cognitive ability in day-to-day life. I forget the number, but it's a very small bit, right? So we have a lot more potential. What to speak of when the soul is completely uncovered from the modes of nature, when there's absolutely no filters through which the pure consciousness of the soul is becoming manifest, right? Sometimes we hear that example. It's just like when a jewel has a very effulgent quality, but it gets covered by layers and layers of dirt and grime and muck, and you can barely see it. But as it's uncovered, then you can see the beauty and the effulgence. So the soul is like that. We are made in the image of God, they say in the Christian theology, and we also understand that, right? We are the Lord's superior energy, but we're very, very small, so we can become covered by the material energy. When that happens, the natural qualities of the soul become very much covered. So, like they have that saying, it's running on one cylinder. You have a 8-cylinder car or a 12-cylinder car, but it's running on one cylinder. It's not doing too good. You're going down the road, little pop bang, and it's kind of shaking, and you're just stalling out at the intersections. You know what I mean? So, that's kind of our condition, right? So. But we're actually, meant for much more, right? But so in the material world, anyway, we are under this delusion that the paradigm is that I am this body, and everything that I see around me is meant for my enjoyment, right? And the pinnacle of that enjoyment is sex. So that's where that all comes from. It's this misconception that I'm the center, and everything is meant for my enjoyment, and sex is like the most enjoyable thing because there's rasa. There's a rasa there. This person loves me. They're offering themselves to me. I'm offering myself to them. We care about each other. And this is real. This is real. Emotion is real, right? But it's perverted because the whole starting point is that aham mimeti, right? I am the enjoyer. Everything is mine, so this is our starting point. And so we're getting off in a very difficult position because this is not the case, right? There is natural psychology in the Vedic understanding. There is Purusha and Prakriti. And Purusha is this concept of being the controller and the enjoyer. And Prakriti is the concept of being the enjoyed, like that. So like putting it in very basic terms, that's there. And in the highest sense, we understand that the only real Purusha is Krishna. And everyone is Prakriti, right? But Srila Prabhupada points out, what is the business between the supreme enjoyer and all of these subordinated enjoyers? Enjoyment, right? We are enabled to experience real enjoyment by endeavoring to bring enjoyment to Krishna, right? When we try to satisfy Krishna, there's that beautiful little verse, if I can remember it, Yasmin tushte jagat tushta, that when one satisfies Krishna, then everyone is satisfied. Why is everyone satisfied when Krishna is satisfied? How does that work? This is the question. Exactly, exactly. So what are some of the examples we have in our Vedic literature that illustrate this point so nicely? Watering the root of the tree. What happens? Everything, every leaf, every fruit, every flower. What's another example? Taking the halava from the plate, putting it in the mouth, feeding the stomach, and all that ghee and all that sugar and all that bhakti is distributed to all the parts of the body, right? So this is very natural. Unfortunately, because the modern society we are living in is misdirected. It's not being guided by the proper personalities. Therefore, this seems counterintuitive to us, doesn't it? At first glance, an average guy like me, wait a second, if I want to become satisfied, if I want to become happy, it's all about what I put in my mouth and what I hold on to and what I touch and what I feel and what I see and what I enjoy listening to, right? Isn't it? That's, at least for fallen people like me, that's the way we were raised. He who ends with the most toys wins. I mean, that was one. The older one is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you'll die. Then you can go all the way back to the Vedic with this. We have our Charvak Muni, eat nice paka anna, eat nice food cooked in ghee. And, how do you keep doing that? Ghee is kind of costly. Well, beg, borrow, or steal, but somehow get ghee. But if you steal, you might get in trouble. But then Charvak has an answer for that too. When the body is finished, everything is finished. Who's going to come after you, So while the body is alive, enjoy nicely by eating ghee. So this philosophy's been around forever, right? But it's actually a mistake, right? Because we are, again, part and parcel of Krishna. And we are eternally connected with the Lord. And our genuine satisfaction comes when He is satisfied. Our genuine happiness comes when He is happy, right? So, and not only is that the genuine way to experience happiness, but the opportunity to experience happiness is so much more greatly enhanced because we're getting away from trying to gratify the material senses of a material body as a method to make a spiritual soul happy, right? So this is already like, what did Prabhupada say in one place? He says, incompatible situation, right? We are trying to become happy in this material world. This is an incompatible situation, an eternal spirit soul in a temporary material body. And there's a nice conversation in the 11th canto, known as the Uddhava Gita. It's rather long. But one of the places there, Uddhava asks Lord Krishna this very question. He says, wait a second. Well, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But he says, the spirit soul is completely pure, completely separate from matter. It has absolutely no connection with matter, right? And the material body is just dead matter. It has no consciousness whatsoever of its own, right? So when we are endeavoring for material enjoyment, when we are having this whole material experience, who is actually getting anything out of this? The soul has no connection with matter, so how material gratification is going to do anything for the soul is a total mystery, right? And matter is dead. It's unconscious. What's matter going to get out of reacting with matter, right? Nothing, right? So it's just this misconception. It's this illusion in the mind that I am the enjoyer. I am the body. So we take on this interface to try to exploit matter. But it's an illusion. It actually doesn't work, right? And that's why, as Dharmasena Prabhu was saying yesterday, that's why there's actually no satisfaction in the material world, right? People are trying to become satisfied, and it's never, ever happening, right? There's no point of satiation. Why do we see the most famous people at times committing suicide out of total exasperation and loneliness, right? They sometimes get to the top of all this and they think like, I've reached the zenith of life, and they realize it's just as hollow as everything else, and it's like, wow, what a frightening realization, isn't it? So sometimes you see that. Very talented people, very wealthy people, right? But have they become satisfied by all of the unlimited opportunities for sense enjoyment they've been offered and they've taken advantage of? No. They're as miserable as guys like us, right? We're looking at them thinking like, wow, if only I had the Rolls Royce, if only I was Robin Williams, if only I was, so many of these personalities, if only I had their talent, if only I had their fame, if only I had their beauty, if only I had their singing, whatever it is. And then some of those people are just kind of like, miserable, right? Because they have all that and they've realized that, oh my God, this is hollow. I mean, you see people dying, these really famous people, they're taking all these drugs to try to keep themselves in some kind of going forward mode, and the drugs kill them, so many famous people, right? So, we see this going on. Anyway, got a little off track, but the main point I was trying to make is just that whether a goat or a human or some of these demigods and some of these even sages that we're reading about here in the 9th canto, why are they tripping and falling? Why are they slipping and sliding, right? Because this misconception that I am this body and this world is here for me to enjoy. Fortunately, in a lot of their cases, like in the case of King Yayāti, for instance, he's in the midst of a very, very powerful spiritual culture, right? He's living at a time where there's still very, very enlightened personalities around. He's got some of them in his upline in his family. He's got some in his downline. He's got sons that are extremely qualified. One of his sons is going to start the dynasty that Krishna appears in. So, once he gets the realization, by the end of the chapter, he's attains personal liberation, right? So, it's interesting, but at the same time, we have to take these lessons that even in very, very qualified situations, this illusion of me being the enjoyer is very, very dangerous and very, very prevalent, right? So, therefore, as Srila Prabhupada refers to in the purport to verse 8, therefore there is this system of Vedic civilization. Prabhupada mentions Vedic civilization, right? So I was curious, so I looked up in the dictionary. I couldn't find a paper one, so I had to use the phone. But anyway, I went for Merriam-Webster, and some of the definitions of a civilization: a relatively high level of cultural and technological development. That's one. Beliefs, customs, arts, etc., characteristic of a particular time or place. A complete human society, right? So these are ideas of civilization, right? So civilization, this Vedic civilization is very, very valuable, right? Sometimes the example was given that even though it's fallen in the age of Kali, Varnashram is not functioning, things like that, but the civilization was so valuable that, like the example is given, like an elephant's tusk, right? Even the elephant is dead, but the tusk is very valuable. So there's so many things from the Vedic civilization that have so much value, right? There's so much value there, right? So one of these items is the protection of women, which was the main point in that verse and in the purport. And Prabhupada mentions, as he mentions many times in many places, that woman should always be protected, right? Prabhupada says by her father in her youth, by her husband when she's grown up, and by her grown-up sons in her old age, right? And I especially appreciated Srila Prabhupada, let me just go back to it for a second, along with protection, he used the word, I believe, caretaker. Just give me a second and make sure I get it right. Yes. Swami means caretaker or master, right? So in this context, this idea of the father protecting the daughter, the husband protecting the wife, and the grown-up son protecting the mother is in the capacity of a caretaker, which is very nice because this injunction is actually coming from the Dharma Shastras, from the Manu Samhita, right? These are, when you have a civilization, that civilization, to have an advanced, developed civilization, you have to have what? Books of knowledge that are guiding the civilization. You have to have an operating system. So what is the operating system, so to speak, of the Vedic civilization? Huh? Thank you, Varnashram, exactly. So where does Lord Krishna introduce this in the Bhagavad Gita, one of our brahmacharis? Where does this system of Varnashram come from? Yes, yes. Lord Krishna says, I have created this system. So if you have a civilization, and in this civilization, the Vedic civilization, the operating system is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He claims that, right? He also says, I am the source of the Vedas. So the law books are the Vedas, right? The operating system is Varnashram Dharma. So this is a real civilization. And if we study some of the components, like today, one of the components is the protection of women, right? So why is that so important, right? Why is that so important? And the reason that it's very, very important is because when the women are properly protected, right, then you have a sane society, right? When people are raised carefully, right? This is very, very important because, you know, one of Arjuna's big arguments in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita was if we kill all these guys, there's going to be Varna Sankara because the women aren't going to be protected. And if they're protected, not protected, they could be exploited. And if they're exploited, you're going to have children that aren't properly raised, right? So, big problem. I mean, we don't see it as a problem now because it's where we live. But where we live is not so great, you know? So when you really look at it from a historical perspective, right? So these things are very, very important. And one of the hallmarks, I would say, of Vedic civilization is responsibility, right? Like you have these categories of occupation and ashram in the Varnashram, right? In Vedic civilization. And if you look at every one of them, there are facilities and there are responsibilities, isn't it? And the facilities give people what they need to do what they need to do in life, both physically and mentally and emotionally and intellectually. And the responsibilities help us grow into the person that actually will benefit from that situation. In other words, we are meant to go forward. Wherever we're starting, that's okay. You know, that's nicely explained in the 12th chapter. Lord Krishna says, be a spontaneous lover of God. Be fully engaged in Raganuga Bhakti. If you can't do that, be a sadhaka. If you can't do that, if you can't do that, if you can't do that, right? So Lord Krishna says, figure out your starting point and get on the path of devotional service, right? So these Varnashram situations, they're very, very important because when a man is trained to be a man, he's trained to be responsible. Like we are very lucky in San Diego, we have a strong brahmachari ashram, right? And generally speaking, when someone is trained as a brahmachari, what is one of the principal things that somebody learns as a brahmachari? Like, what are you being trained to be as a brahmachari? Also, down the line. Huh? A Brahmin. And what is the quality that supports all of these ashram situations? Humility. To be a servant, isn't it? A brahmachari is trained to be the servant of the spiritual master. And this is very, very important because going back to the Prakriti and Purusha psychology. So as men, we come into this world somewhat endowed with a Purusha bhav, like a Purusha psychology. And this is important because somebody has to protect the family, somebody has to work hard, somebody has to plow the field, or nowadays type the keys on the computer, whatever it is. But somebody has to have some gainful occupation with which to support a family, right? in traditional Indian culture, like the Goshas, the cow people, it's understood that until you have a cow, you can't think about getting married. You got to have your own cow. If you have your own cow, you can think about getting married, because when you have the baby, you're going to be able to take care of the baby, and you're going to be able to take care of the wife, and etc. You know, of course, then you need the cat, and it grows. You know, but you know, so this idea is there. So becoming a servant is very, very important. So we are trained to become the servant of the spiritual master. And when one comes out of the brahmacharya ashram, if we might go into it with the Purusha Bhava, thinking it's all about me, everything's for my enjoyment. And if we're properly trained, we come out of it thinking, I am the servant of Krishna. I am the servant of my spiritual master. I am the servant of my elders. I am the servant of my family members, right? I remember when our son went to Gurukula, it was a traditional Gurukula, and one of the important things they learn is the science of serving. Ramapati went to the same school. You learn how to serve your elders, how to serve your juniors, how to relate with your peers, isn't it? You learn the science of how to relate with others. And there's not too many skills that are going to get you farther in this world than that. If you know how to relate with people properly, right? That's the essence of relationships, right? And it's based on accepting that I am not the master, I am the servant, right? And if we get that right, if somehow or other by Gurukula or by Brahmacharya ashram or by a combination of both, if this perverted manifestation of the Purusha Bhava can get beaten out of us, and if we can actually accept that I am the servant. I mean, look at our process. Lord Chaitanya, we understand that in some ways this Sankirtan process is so high that it even rejects the more traditional Varnashram Dharma, but it rejects it on the principle of total surrender. Like Lord Chaitanya, he goes through all of the ashrams and all of the Varnas, right? It's, what's that verse? Naham vipra nachagriya patir napi vaishyo nasudra. He goes through all the orders, all the ashrams. I'm not this, I'm not that. I mean, he was a sannyasi, he was a Brahmin, so many things by external vision. But he's getting to the essence, to the heart of it. I'm not all these things. What am I? I am not just a servant. I am the servant of the servant of the servant, 1,000 times the servant of the dearmost servant of the gopis. So this is where we're trying to get. This is where we're trying to get, right? So we need to really appreciate that this opportunity to become the servant, right? To become the servant of the Lord, to become the servant of the spiritual master, right? And to see everyone in their relationship with Krishna means that we want to properly serve everybody. And how we serve them is different according to their position and our position, but the mood is always service, right? What is that beautiful verse? Vidya Vinaya Sampane, the humble sage by virtue of true vision, sees with equal, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. And so he wants to serve all of them. Of course, it's different. You know, you don't embrace the tiger, Prabhu, right? Because you get eaten alive. But the service is done appropriately, but still with the mood of being a servant, right? So, you know, this is our ultimate goal. We are trying to become the servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. And this is a huge part of what we get from the Brahmacharya ashram. This is a huge part of what we get from Grihastha ashram, Vanaprastha ashram, Sannyasa ashram, like that. Like all of these positions, we are meant to serve in different ways. And by this service, by this attitude of service, right? If we can get this right, all the doors are open. Like you go to Mayapur, I remember, you know, when you go to Mayapur and you gradually become aware, now one of them passed away, but like Jananivas and Pankajangri Prabhu, right? These devotees came to Mayapur in like 1972, and they just started serving the deities. And they were just serving the deities and serving the deities and serving the deities. And they were just very humble brothers. But one time, Bhavananda tells this story, one time Srila Prabhupada came, and he was the GBC, Maharaj at the time. And Prabhupada came to Mayapur from a world tour, and Bhavananda was the leader of the GBC. And Prabhupada was just talking about Jananivas and Pankajangri, you know, and like just glorifying them. And Bhavananda said that's when he realized these are really special devotees, you know. And ultimately, they made that whole Mayapur Academy, for them to teach this art of deity worship, So, and what I noticed about them, what most people noticed about them, is that they just have a very genuine service attitude, right? They're just serving, and they're not serving for position, they're not serving for power, they're not serving for notoriety. They're just serving because they're really attached to being the servant of Guru and the servant of Krishna, right? So this is the position, that we are aspiring for, right? And so, this is our process. And I'll end with this. I met a devotee in Hawaii a couple of years ago. They were visiting two brahmacharis. And one of them was a bit older. He had joined a little older. And he's a disciple of Bhakti Charu Swami. And so he told me a funny story. He joined at the temple in Ujjain that Bhakti Charu Maharaj had started there at the place where Krishna went to Gurukula. And a very nice temple. And he had joined there. And when he joined, he was a very successful upper management. He was a big manager in corporate world in India, a very expert manager. And so naturally, after he was a devotee, a little time, Bhakti Charu Maharaj there in Ujjain, they put him in a very high managerial role. And then, Bhakti Charu Maharaj would come and go and travel. And he said one time Bhakti Charu Maharaj came and met with him, as he was one of the managers and the leaders. And he was complaining to Bhakti Charu Maharaj about all the management trouble, and he said Bhakti Charu Maharaj just started laughing, and he said, "Your problem is that you think your job is to engage and order all these people around." He said, "But your job is to be their servant." And it was just like bang, And the devotee said, as soon as he got that, like everything changed. You know what I mean? So, whatever service we have, if we develop this service attitude, then there's no problem whatsoever. There's no difficulty. Like, how hard is it to distribute books? But like when Govardhan gives class, we hear these interactions that he has with these people, and they're disarmed by his sincerity, right? Like we hear these stories. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but like I've been to a few of your classes, and it's very, very enlivening because you see when somebody sincerely is trying to serve their guru and to serve Srila Prabhupada and to get the Srila Prabhupada's books into the hands and to serve them by getting this transcendental knowledge into their hand. And people feel that. People feel that. As long as they feel that we're envious of them because we're competing with them, because we think we're whatever, then they sense that. I remember going out on books and like the toughest day of my life, I'd have a good day and then I'd get a little puffed, and like I'd be out there the next day, okay, today's the day I want to do my, and Krishna just sends, one after the other, until you're finally just like, Krishna save me, you know what I mean? So, the more we can become free from this idea that I'm the controller and I'm the enjoyer, and just really enter into this, I'm the servant of the servant of the servant. Life is good, So I'm at the end, so I apologize. I should have asked for the time frame. There's a lot more here, but I'm sorry. So any comments or questions or discussion? This is the time we stop, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I got something.
But can I just make one comment?
Of course, Prabhu.
Probably none of you have ever heard of this before. But anyway, before I joined, I was going here and there, and I ended up in New York. The Ramakrishna Mission has a very established institution. They have a big building and everything. So I was getting involved with them, and I remember there was a song that we were singing, and it was written by Śukrācārya. And was something like this verse that I am not a brahmacharya, I am nidasa, I am simply Brahman, something like that, you see. And when I came across this verse, many years ago in the CC, in Naham Vipro Nachadanapati, like you referred to, I was thinking, oh, this may be Lord Chaitanya's answer to that. This is that would ring a real bell with those who are familiar with impersonalism and so forth. But I'm gonna do some research and see if I can lock down that song and see, because that'll be a whole dimension, the dimensions of that, understanding that song.
Nice, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, well, that was amazing. Thank you, Dhruv Prabhu. Vaikuntha Prabhu, I'm my good fortune that I caught your class This is Maitreya Das. Please
Oh,
accept my
Maitreya, Hare
obeisance. Thank you.
Krishna, Vanchakalpa.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful class. You made a really good point, and this point about exploiting women that the Vedas deals with. Nowadays, there's a tendency for people to look at religious organizations as being trying to suppress women. Oh, they have to, cover their heads or whatever. They see that we're, in a way, trying to take advantage of the womanly energy. But if you look at a culture like the Vedas and you look at one like ours, it's clear that this modern culture is about exploiting women, putting pictures of them on billboards, and using their images and using their energy against them, really. The Vedic culture was protective of women, just the opposite. So that's something to focus on. It's not about individual freedoms like people make such a big deal of today. It's the overall honoring of women and protecting them. And it just, anyway, you made the point nicely. I just wanted to echo that.
Thank you, Maitreya Prabhu. Nice, so nice to hear from you. The night that Srila Prabhupada arrived in Philadelphia in 1975, just before he came, there was a reporter who actually spent a few days around the temple and, was writing an article and wanted to understand. And then there were a couple of reporters. And anyway, one of them said they hit Prabhupada with this question that, asking about the inferior roles that you assign to women and blacks in your movement. This was the question, right? And Srila Prabhupada, I think he had one of the devotees clarify it. He didn't even quite get it. It was like, what? The inferior roles that you assign to women and blacks in your movement. And then Srila Prabhupada said, we don't do that. He said, our movement is meant to bring everyone to the spiritual platform. And I accept women as my disciples. I accept blacks as my disciples, whites as my disciples. What we are doing is bringing everyone to the spiritual platform. But then he explained more deeply. He said, but it is only on that spiritual platform that you have equality, right? So, they're trying to say you're treating people unequally. But Prabhupada said, no, we don't do that. We're bringing everybody to the spiritual platform. But then he clarified, but it's only, in other words, point Maitreya was making, you're the ones that are actually making these distinctions, because Prabhupada said it's only on the spiritual platform that true equality exists. And on the material platform, these distinctions are always there. Even if you try to pretend they're not, that's one thing. But realistically, right, the classless society of communism, but like, who has the big dachas out at the beach resorts? Is it the common proletariat or is it the big, Communist Party honcho guy, right? So it's like this thing is always there. So Prabhupada said, and then he gave a lot of good examples. He said the master will always be there, the servant will always be there, exploitation, like that. So Prabhupada gave a lot of good examples, so. But he made that point. He said, we're not exploiting women. We don't assign inferior roles to women or blacks or anybody. Rather, we are trying to bring everybody up to the spiritual platform. But he also pointed out that we're the only ones that are really doing that. All the so-called people that are trying to create this equality are not succeeding because it's not possible. Everyone's a unique individual. Yeah. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.